Namaste. In our series of open conversation, today we talk about the series The Crown, and in that context, we talk about surreal and the omnipotence. Open conversation is a series of free flowing and spontaneous conversation on a thematic subject which is of uh, interest at large. And we have today a very juicy subject, and which is a very popular series, as I told you, The Crown. And to discuss this subject, we have with us our psychoanalysis consultant, Mr. Himanshu Vaidya. Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
So, sir, The Crown is a very popular series, and so is the public interest in the royal affairs. Can we start from here? I mean, why is this subject of interest?
Everyone is more interested in Princess Diana than in Prince Charles ever was. People have always been interested terribly in affairs of others. Psychoanalytically speaking, there is a strong sense of voyeurism in our species, that there is a strong voyeur in all of us who wants to live life by identification from a distance, not to be a player on the ground, but to be a person in the audience, and from there, without taking the risks of difficult feelings which arise while being on the ground, from a distance to identification, and in fantasy to live out life. So our desires are such that we cannot fulfill them given our limited capabilities and constraints of the world. And yet they are so strong that we cannot give them up. So the only thing left is to satisfy them vicariously in some way, and identification becomes one route of doing it. And one way to practice identification is to uh, go into art or consumption of art or voyeurism of various types. This includes literature, novel, films, and even real life affairs of celebrities and someone who is very successful in life. So this terrible interest in the affairs of the successful others is something historically always there. In ancient times also, if we look at their literature, their folklore, their dramas, we will see how people were terribly interested in the royal affairs even thousands of years back. It is only now that the royal affairs have come on the TV screen. Otherwise, people were always interested in royal affairs, and it is not difficult to know why. Because uh, the royalty sort of signifies our deepest of desires to live like kings and queens in palaces. Those desires are universal. Who doesn't want to live like kings and queens in palaces? Who doesn't want to be the center stage of all limelight where the entire kingdom looks up to you? So, this narcissistic desire that I am the Lord of the universe and you are a mere mortal who is out there to be impressed by me and serve me, these are very common and universal human desires. So, the terrible interest in the royalty is because of the terrible interest in one's own desires of having to all of wanting to live like royalty. So there is this royal drama inside of our unconscious all the time, where we want to be like the royals, we want to be the kings and queens and live like them. And since it's not possible in reality, we vicariously do it through dreams, art, and by looking at TV serials like this, by identification. So it's a very human thing to be fascinated by something like The Crown or any story involving royalty or any real life event involving royalty or anything historical related to royalty. It's very human and very understandable from a psychoanalytic standpoint.
So, sir, why this push of the surreal that we humans have from inside?
It's a very interesting question because uh, human beings look at the real aspect of life only as a necessary evil. Our preference always is for the surreal. So we are not excited every day, we are bored every day, tired to death actually. We are excited only when we have to go to a party or to a movie or to a restaurant or to something which is surreal, something which is juicy, something which is not everyday, not monotonous, something which enhances our sensual experience, something which enhances our esteem, our ego gratification or emotional gratification. And this intense gratifications, these excitations, they happen to us not in everyday course of affairs, but only in something which is apart from everyday. So the everyday of uh, the household work, the doctor, the carpenter, the electrician, those are not the things that really excite us. They are like necessary evils. Our desires actually are in those areas of color, aesthetic, juice, what we call rasa in Indian aesthetics, and what I call the surreal. Our desires are in the surreal, and our life also is in the surreal as we like to live it. So there is a dramatist in the unconscious mind of all of us, and there is a quest for the surreal in all of us, and our desire wants to satisfy itself in the surreal, at times through drama, at times without drama, but the satisfaction of desire is in the surreal, and therefore there is a constant push from the surreal. At the moment the pressure of the real goes, we automatically, without any effort, move into the surreal, into our dreams, into our quest for gratification.
It's so nice to know that this is normal. So, sir, how does omnipotence come in then?
Uh, this is a very interesting area because we project omnipotence on God, on religious figures, on celebrities, and very clearly on the royalty. And historically, for thousands of years in many countries, the kings and queens were seen to be messengers of God or children of God or representatives of God. So divinity and omnipotence were associated by society at large with royalty for hundreds and thousands of years. Obviously, something basic in psychology must be at work for this phenomena to continue for centuries. And what we see now, what we understand now is that we all have a quest for omnipotence. And because we realize that we cannot experience omnipotence directly, because every day slaps us every day, and because every day slaps us every day, we realize that in reality we cannot be omnipotent. We cannot be even quarter omnipotent. Yet the desire is so strong that we cannot give it away. And therefore, the only way we satisfy this desire is by identification with royalty, with celebrities, or with movie characters. And therefore, we will see that in most movies, most successful movies, there is some omnipotence associated with the hero. If you make realistic movies beyond the point, nobody wants to see them. I mean, we already have an overdose of reality. We don't need more of it. In fact, we need relief from reality into the fantasy of omnipotence. Because every day is full of helplessness and we have a desire for omnipotence. Now, this dichotomy that our desire is for omnipotence and the reality is of helplessness, this is a very difficult conflict to live with. And we all need relief at regular intervals of going into fantasy or going into the surreal and the re-experiencing the omnipotence in some way. So the quest for omnipotence is inborn in us. Now there are two parts to it. From a psychoanalytic point of view, the Kleinian approach deals very well with this. That we are born with this quest of omnipotence, And we experience in early life the all good object as the omnipotent object, and the all good mother as the omnipotent mother. And then there is a splendor of these omnipotent objects, and we are dazzled by the splendor. So there is a splendor of the all good object, the splendor of the all good mother, and we are dazzled by the splendor. And this phenomena reoccurs in adult life. That we project omnipotence onto celebrities, they look splendid. There is a splendor around them, and we are then dazzled by that splendor. So it is all inside of us. We project omnipotence. The person on whom we project omnipotence, there is a splendor around that person, and then we are dazzled by the splendor. Only if we were to live every day with that person for a few days, this whole projection would go flat. And then we would feel betrayed as to what I thought about him and what he actually is. And then, after some days of feeling betrayed, disappointed, and sad, we would again start our quest, our search for omnipotence, again by projecting those things onto another person. Because the desire is so strong that even after repeated failures, the desire does not go away. It requires very deep work for the desire to be reduced, and whether it can go away or not, or we just have to manage it, is a question that remains open. But the central point is this, that in early life we experience omnipotence, and it is so seductive, so addictive, and so pleasant, and so dazzling that we remain in its quest forever in our lives by and large. Very few people are free from it. And this creates this whole phenomena of people projecting omnipotence on some reality objects where there is something extraordinary, either by birth or by wealth or by acquisition or by attainment or by look, something more than ordinary, which provides a, a kind of a hook in reality on which we can put our omnipotence. So there is a cause, there has to be cause in the outside object which can solicit our omnipotent projections. There has to be an invitation. Now the royalty, by virtue of their wealth and power, are above the ordinary, far above the ordinary, and therefore they invite this omnipotent projection. So there is a cause out there in reality that indeed, in reality, the royalty is far more wealthy, far more powerful, far more often good looking also. And therefore, there is an occasion to project omnipotence. There is an invitation. And we are waiting for an invitation anyway. We are desperate. So anytime we get an invitation, we throw the projections, and then we are dazzled by the splendor of our own projection. So
And
there
I
is,
guess,
yeah.
yes, sorry, you continue.
So there is this event always going on, that the the being dazzled by the splendor, we get so much of pleasure by associating in that phenomenon, by participating in that phenomenon. It's a very seductive pleasure. You can't let it go. It is so addictive. And that is what we see in
And
this whole fan following of the crown. Yeah, you're
correct.
saying something.
I think even they're so far from reach. I think that is also maybe one reason which contributes, for people to know and learn more about them.
Right.
And they're not covered, they're not enough covered by any of the newspapers or the magazines. I mean, they have their own. They have their own. I
Uh,
don't know what do you call it.
in good
They,
words,
they, they, they.
in good words, you
Sorry.
can call it privacy. You can also call it cover-ups.
Yes, they have strict privacy norms, unlike the celebrities. And maybe that is what makes them, people to want to know more about them.
Yes, because uh, curiosity is one element, and search for omnipotence is the second element.
So precisely that's what I wanted to ask you. We desperately, a person wants something desperately. Once we get it, the intensity falls. The intensity for your desire for that particular thing or that particular person drastically drops. And why is it so?
This is something which was pointed out thousands of years back by Gautam Buddha. I should call Gautam the Buddha. Gautam the Buddha said that he analyzed the causes of human suffering and he came to some 12 basic causes of human suffering. And one of the causes he came to was devaluation of what you have and overvaluation of what you don't have. And when we look at the psychological foundation of this phenomenon, we realize that it has to do with transference and projection. Um, when we have something, when we don't have something, we project so many things onto that thing, as though when we get that, right, we are going to get everything in the world and nothing is necessary after that. So that is the alpha and omega of all our desires. But after we get it, we realize it is not so. The pleasure that we get by having that thing starts tapering off, and very soon it stops giving us pleasure. And then we have to seek another object of desire. So no object of desire exhausts our desire for pleasure. Right? Although when we don't have that object for some time, we can feel so that only if I have the object, uh, my desire for pleasure will be exhausted with this object. And there is this whole game of transference and projection. And in that, we project the all good object onto that object we don't have yet. And we tell ourselves as though all the goodness of the world is only in that one good object. And if only you can have it, nothing else is necessary after that. But once you have it, you realize it is not true. Not only it does not have everything, but you require many objects at a time to really satisfy your quest for pleasure.
So how do you control that? Is there a way for someone to control it?
Uh,
Other than, of course, being mindful.
yeah, so let us see how we, let us go deeper into how we feel and how we experience this phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can look at how we control it. Let us say you don't have a car and you are dreaming about a particular car day in and day out. And you are doing nothing but collecting money anywhere you can to buy that car. And you keep checking out all the cars, their features, and so on. And you decide upon one car, and then you feel as though nothing can give you happiness except this car. And only if you could have that car, you would be happy forever. Almost that kind of feeling. But once you have that car, there is an excitation, euphoria for some days, and then it tapers off. And then another object of desire comes about, and then you again feel the same thing. Cycle goes on. You can also see this in terms of people who are in love and who get married. That once they get married, right, every day kills everything. It is not easy to project the surreal projections and transferences on somebody you live with 24/7. So I often personally feel that there is a different kind of uh, practical relationship and a different kind of a surreal relationship. And if you want to enjoy the surreal relationship, it is better to keep distance. Too much closeness and too much of spending time together every day kills the surreal. And then we have to find another object for the surreal. So, this being the case, uh, control in one sense is possible that we understand it. if we understand what phenomena is at work, and we also understand the limitations of reality, that once we realize this phenomena in experience, not just in theory, but in experience, and next time it happens, we realize that yes, this is because of my omnipotent projection. The power of that phenomena to control us goes down radically, and we start getting free from that phenomenon. And the more free we are, the more we are consumed by the violent turmoil of this storms of desire.
So it's like devil in the deep sea. You choose what you want.
It's true because the fundamental problem is that we have desires which are infinite in nature, and we don't
Hmm.
have the ability to satisfy those desires. So
So, sir,
since
how do you?
that is the case, the only thing that
Hmm.
remains is to manage and optimize those desires.
So, how do we escape this terrible everyday, as you call it, into the splendor or the surreal? So,
Uh,
how do we?
we use a variety of escape strategies. And I won't even call it escape strategies. Let me take back my words. I should be calling them celebration strategies. Because uh, apart from that, what is there in the routine life to really cherish? One can take the attitude of enlightenment and say that you can make everything exciting and sublime. That's a different thing altogether. But that is for 0.01% of population, not for the general population. So for the general population, what I call real is nothing more than necessary evil. And the celebration or the real living of life is only in the surreal. So how do we get into the surreal? Take example of shopping malls, movies, art, projecting on a God man, our omnipotence, and then seeking him as our guru, trying to be with celebrities. Just look at people, how happy they are, even if they only shake hands with a celebrity. And so, celebrity is not a human being, but somebody who has descended from heaven with lightning and thunder. That is because of that whole idea of projection of omnipotence, and that happens because of our own narcissism. That we want to be omnipotent, that is our first narcissistic desire, cannot make it happen. So try to do it in vicarious ways and try to live out the surreal. So not only the omnipotence, equally important is the surreal. So omnipotence actually is one part of the surreal. So when we look at going to malls where we celebrate our festivals, we put on good clothes, we put on good events, we put on something not ordinary, and we try to escape the everyday boredom into celebration by creating something surreal. Take the example of the festival of dance, the Navratri festival that we have. When the music is going on and the actual dance is going on, people dressed well and so on, it almost looks like a surreal thing, as though in some astral world, right? We have seen this kind of an astral event going on all the time, and those astral memories are with us. We are trying to recreate on this earth. That is the kind of mindset and feeling that we get. So we escape, not escape, but we celebrate and we move away from the everyday by going to malls, in art, uh, by participating in events which have some spice of the surreal, seeking out God-man, seeking out mysterious and occult knowledge, and something not ordinary, something that has a magical quality to it, be it Reiki or pranic healing or something that has some magical quality to it, which is not everyday, which is not boring. So we want to live out our magical thinking. We want to live out the surreal, and we escape into these things. Not escape, but we go into these things for celebration. And that is the way we try to avoid uh, the everyday boredom. And therefore, you see all societies, they have an annual calendar of festivals,
Hmm.
because regular interval we have to get out of every day, this boring every day that kills everything, and go into celebration. And we just need a cause. And if there's no cause, we'll have to invent a cause.
Yes.
So if nothing else works, we will say this day belongs to this particular god, and this is how the festival has to be celebrated.
True.
So if
It
this,
almost looks.
yeah,
It's sorry.
this,
Yeah. No. No. You continue. Sir. No. No. It's okay.
I was just saying that if
I
this
think it.
in reality, we'll invent things to celebrate.
Yes. It almost. It's like a tragedy. The gulf between the real and the surreal, and still, it's not the end. We humans. We still look forward to something. I mean, that's. It is not that one festival is making us happy. It is, and the way it is, I think it has always been like this.
Yes.
We 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 might say that modernity and things are changing, our lives are changing, but I think what I gather, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, we have always been like this
Yes. And
ever
modernity,
since. I mean,
yes,
yeah.
modernity tried to reduce the element of the surreal, but that has not produced very satisfying results. First is they could never get over the surreal. Nobody can get over it because it is embedded into our very hardware, the way our minds are hardwired. So no external construct or ideology can really change the way the hardware operates. It is one part. The second part of it is uh, this goodbye to the surreal, the goodbye to the mythology, goodbye to the archetypal way of living does not produce very satisfying results. And it is definitely a tragedy, and we have to go slightly deeper into it because uh, I think it brings us to the dilemma of the natural frustrations of human existence, brings us to the very core of the human condition. And the core of the human condition is that we have more desires than we can satisfy, and therefore frustration is inevitable. It's a part of our being human, it's a part of the human condition. So we call it the natural frustrations of human existence. Now, one of the elements in this uh, basket full of frustrations is the element of the difference between the surreal and the real. Take, for example, uh, we would like to be always young, but we cannot be. And there is a huge amount of frustration in us, anger, pain, fear, all of that. Nothing we can do about it. We would like to have a partner who has never thought of anybody else except us. And there is nobody of that type in the world. So regardless of when we have met somebody, either the person already has thought or been with somebody, or in future will think or be with somebody, and there is no way. Uh, it may not happen in action at the most, but there is no way you can prevent it at the level of. So the desire still is, even if you know this reality, the desire still stays unchanged. That the desire to have somebody who does not even think of anybody, that desire stays as it is. And this is a very good example of our surreal desires and uh, the inevitability of their frustration in reality. And this happens in all areas of life, whether it is the case of relationships, or it is the case of profession, or it is the case of politics or academics, or whatever be the area. In all areas, we have a basket full of surreal desires, very strong, which just does not go away regardless of how much reality experience we have. To the contrary. And we just have to bear the frustration. We have no choice.
So does art help anyway here?
Yes, uh,
Oh.
art helps us, or art can help us, let me say, one in satisfying these surreal desires, this omnipotent quest, this quest of omnipotence, vicariously by identification. So one of the ways of satisfying is that if I cannot find a person, a woman who has not thought of anybody except me, maybe
Hmm.
I can create a character of that type in the novel.
Okay.
Maybe I can create a character of that type in a film and thereby satisfy this desire. The other way is to create that character in my dream. So dream, art, all of these are measures through which desires which cannot be satisfied in reality and which cannot be let go, I mean, which cannot be allowed to let go, which cannot be put aside, they are too strong. I can satisfy those desires in dreams or in the surreal, in art or in some way. Now, when we talk of the crown, the same thing is in play. That I have a desire to be the king. I have a desire to be the queen. I have the desire that camera and the entire country should be looking up to me. And I should be in the limelight. I should be in the news. Everyone should be interested in my life. But since that is not possible, right, I identify with those for whom this is true and satisfy my desire vicariously. And this happens by the phenomena which we said that the reality condition of them being above average is one, and then the inner dynamics takes over. That I project omnipotence, I am dazzled by the omnipotence. I feel ecstatic happiness by associating with that omnipotence. It brings back the ecstasy, memory of ecstatic feeling of early childhood. And that is addictive. And that is what is at play. So, again, the same thing that desire is infinite, capability is limited, frustration of desire is inevitable. Frustration, though inevitable, is unbearable, and therefore, part of it has to be addressed vicariously by many means. One of the means is by watching movies or serials like The Crown.
This is, I don't know, after this, should I even say or not? Because I'm such a great fan of the royal family. I mean, I really, I don't know, I'm not sure I'm fan of Crown. I watch Crown. I've watched Crown many times, and I follow the royal family to the core. So
Just,
I think this,
nothing to be defensive
this,
about. Just do it consciously, knowing
yes,
what is happening, what used to happen
yes. I think I
automatically.
need to dig inside what is at unrest. And
Ju- 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 yeah, just a moment. I forgot one important thing in case of art. Uh,
mhm.
there are periods of history, and in every period, the surreal and the omnipotence, the quest for omnipotence, is satisfied in different ways. Unfortunately, in two large transitions, not two, let me say, the transition from pre-modern to modern, and now what is going on, the transition from modern to post-modern, not in the academic sense of the term, but the way I use it, art has not delivered on its function of gratification, of nostalgia, of catharsis leading to freedom. So in that sense, art has failed when we made a transition from pre-modern to modern, and it has failed today when we are in the middle of making a transition from the modern to the post-modern or the after-modern, whatever you call it. And
Mhm.
that is where this fundamental differences of the surreal and the real, the desire and reality. And the frustration that is involved in that gap, that
Hmm.
has not been addressed adequately by art. And
So
therefore,
can you please elaborate when you, yeah,
yeah,
okay,
yeah, please go on.
can you elaborate? I thought you were concluding. So I just wanted to elaborate when you say art has failed.
Yeah. So let me say, let us take the area of relationships. Let us say, take two relationships: the guru and the student, and man and the woman. And what was the archetypal thinking about it? So, with the guru and the student in pre-modern times, there was this whole reverential relationship, a very sublime, a very surreal kind of relationship. There was a relationship of the student looking up to the guru as a parent and a god, and the guru looking to the student as a responsibility for to take him to not only give him the skills but take him to moksha, nirvana. Now that has today transformed into a service provider consumer relationship.
hmm.
The whole
Okay.
surreal has gone out of it. Only the real has remained. Now, when that
Hmm.
happens, right, it involves uh, the breaking and painful breaking of many desires, which are surreal desires of ours. That our desire to have the type of relationship which existed in the pre-modern times between a student and the teacher, that desire is frustrated. It can no longer be satisfied. Now that this change calls for mourning. It calls for uh, satisfying the desire first through art vicariously. Second, to go into nostalgia of how it used to be once. And third, catharsis of the pain that now it is a service provider consumer relationship. That part is gone. Those experiences can never be had. And therefore, we need art to create some stories, some movies, some poems, some songs to address these
Hmm.
elements. That one, those who don't have the experiences can have the gratifying experiences vicariously through art. Two, people can look back in nostalgia and feel all the feelings that come with nostalgia. That once upon a time it was there. And third, the realization that it is no longer there and is never going to come again. And therefore, the loss and the pain and the mourning. So we need stories, we need TV serials, we need movies, we need plays, we need songs and music for all the three. But art has not addressed those things adequately. Similarly, the relationship between man and the woman.
Yes, I do agree.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
similarly, the relationship between man and the woman, it was so much covered up with mythology and the surreal
Hmm.
that by today's standards, it would be called histrionic. So today it is so functional, so real that the whole surreal has gone off. And if somebody tries to bring in the surreal, it looks almost histrionic. So today, in this functional era, if somebody, not only somebody, the whole generation, whole society reminds itself how it was once and wants to experience it, feel the nostalgia how it once was, and mourn the loss of what is gone and experiences which cannot be had.
Hmm.
We don't have adequate stories, songs, films, dramas to really address those losses, those gratification by vicariousness, by vicarious approaches, and those nostalgia exploring entities. So that kind of art has not happened in the transition from pre-modern to modern. And now, as we move from modern to the more functional and less mythological time, as it looks, but it appears as though uh, the surreal and mythology might come back. That is my expectation.
That is definitely my wish, because I guess art has a major role to play in evolution. At what pace are we evolving?
Because the
And
the saying goodbye to the mythological and the surreal and the traditional also has a huge cost, not only in terms of psychological enrichment, quality of life, and psychological health. Of course, these elements are there. Not only social health, but also in terms of environment. Just take a look at how you can look at cow from two different ways. For a Hindu, the cow has so many mythological stories and divinity associated with it.
attached, yeah.
The cow is revered as the divine mother.
Hmm.
Whereas if you look at it from a strictly scientific functional point of view, it is only a manufacturing system. The input is grass and output is milk. The entire basket full of thoughts and ideas which are in our mind because of culture, the whole thing goes out of the window. Now, if you start looking at it as a factor of production in the dairy industry and nothing more than that, this means the entire ecosystem of ideas, thoughts, and feelings, mythological stories, traditions, religion, all of that associated with cow is going out. And when that is happening, the new generation which does not have experience that, it does not have, it needs art because that's the only way of going to re-experience it by vicariously through art, or to go into nostalgia of the present generation, or to go into mourning. And that kind of thing, I'm just giving a few examples, but as a larger trend,
Hmm.
those kind of addressing the change of historical periods from pre-modern to modern and modern to post-modern, that function of art has failed to deliver on that. And I'm not referring to any particular country's art or form of art. It is art in general that has failed.
True, and it is so sad. What is the difference then between a robo and a human? If you do not have that affection, there's no difference that ways. I think so. We have this. We should take that responsibility, of having our mythological stories reach to people,
True,
especially whom it matters, the younger generation the most.
because without that, the only thing that remains is utilitarian thinking, and that does not have any enrichment, any aesthetic, any color, or any ideational or mythological or reverential enrichment. Utilitarian approach is very uh, use and throw approach.
Inhuman.
Inhuman. It's
I
a use
think
and
it's too inhuman.
yeah,
Yes.
it's a use and throw approach,
Yes.
because the
Yes.
utilitarian approach, you only use everything and everybody for pleasure.
Yes. Sadly, yes.
So I think this is how the king sort of uh, rounds out that when we look at the two thematic ideas of the surreal and the omnipotence in a psychological sense, and then we connect it to the crown, we are able to understand why people like crown so much, why they are disturbed when something happens or does not happen in crown, how they desperately wish that something X happens in crown, and how they feel happy and euphoric when they experience that ecstatic pleasure associated with
Yes.
omnipotence.
Yes. I think I have a lot to take back home, and something to introspect as well. And thank you so much. This was such a direct thing, all our talks. There's definitely something where one needs to introspect, but this was so much for me. So, special thank you, sir, for this talk. And for our viewers, do write to us. And if you want any such topic to be discussed or talked, you are free to write to us at hvindia@gmail.com. Till then, take care. Namaste, sir.
Namaste.